Hello and welcome to English Literature with Susan. Today I'm here with you with a reading and analysis of Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. Before moving to the text of the poem, let me add 2 points. First, about Dylan Thomas and the movement generally called New Romanticism. In New Romanticism, the poets, after 2 or 3 decades of modernism and high modernism, in which the emphasis was on impersonal poetry, as T.S. Eliot says, poetry is a constant sacrifice of the self, of the personality of the poet. We turn back in New Romanticism to the personality, to the expression of the self of the poet. And because of this similarity between the English Romantics and other Romantics around the world and the New Romantic movement of poetry, Dylan Thomas is included among the New Romantics. He expresses himself in the poems. We see the persona of the poet speaking instead of creating a figure such as T.S. Eliot did in his The Love Song of Geoffrey Prufrock. He is the poet. Dylan Thomas is the poet who is speaking with us, and this is how he's established as a neo-romantic figure. And another reason that he's categorized as a neo-romantic poet is in 20th century is that he brings nature back to poetry. So nature becomes a force in his poems, and this is not accidental because his personal life is spent, at least in his childhood, in nature. And Fern Hill is a location in which he spent his summertime with his aunt and his uncle. So this is how nature includes itself at a personal and private level, and also at a, let's say, school-based level as a neo-romantic into Dylan Thomas's poems. And you might know that Dylan Thomas, the second point is that you might know that Dylan Thomas is a discovered poet. So he didn't sense this himself that he's going to be a poet, so he didn't consider such a future for himself. But he took part in a competition like, you know, let's say campaign, and he won a prize. So he started his poems. He tried to experiment with different forms and structures of poetry. And he tried his hand at rhyming, at metrical patterns. But what is structurally important maybe about his poems, what makes his poems personal to Thomas himself, is the dialectical force. In his poems, there are always two forces entangled, two forces maybe sometimes fighting, sometimes cooperating. But this is the unity of being. This is the unity of representation in his poems, or let's say synthesizing of the two forces in his poems, which makes Thomas a unique figure in 20th century. We see at the same time many of these characteristics in the Romantics, therefore it justifies his being classified as a no-romantic as well, or being compared to romantic figures such as William Wordsworth or sometimes William Blake. And in terms of his dialectic, he can also be compared with a figure such as a romantic figure such as Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So we can move to the text of the poem. The poem, I have talked about the presence or the representation of two forces, a dialectic in Dylan Thomas's poetry, a kind of binarism in his poems. In this poem, this binarism, as this is maybe somehow represented in this painting, the binary or the bipolarity of past and present. We listen to the poet with a retrospective language and point of view. He talks about his childhood while he's an adult man. His childhood is like a dream to him, or what is past is something golden, and then we have the present time, and time as another type of force. So time is like a character in this poem, but this character is a dynamic one. He's not, if we can call time here, time is not static kind of character. time has a presence in this poem, and we see, for example, from time, which is benevolent and beneficent and merciful, time becomes, let's say, a cruel force when the poet becomes an adult. And we can also, let's say, divide the poem between a dreamlike representation of the past and the realistic presentation of the poem. To show this kind of change and shifting, from the dreamlike past to the realistic, harsh present, we can also notice the language of the poem in this poem, and there are some of the elements in this poem, in these paintings. I have chosen some of these paintings inspired by the poem. We have horses and foxes in the poem. We have all the sun long and all the moon long in the poem. We have trees. We have apple apple tree especially. We have daisies, and we have barns and the lilting house. So there are, and the owl, of course. So there are some of the elements of the poem represented alongside this painting. And he starts the poem, let's say, with breaking the rules of English grammar. Now as I was. The first word of the poem is now, so we are in the present time. The poet is an adult figure, but he was. Now, as I was, young and easy, under the apple boughs, and notice the presence of apple in the poem. Apple has also an Edenic symbolism in the poem, as we will see later. Apple boughs about the lilting house. Lilting means uh, having a rhythm. He means that the house was so alive that it was as if it was moving. So the word lilting is a kind of a relevant term here, as he's talking about the dynamism of life in that rural atmosphere. House and the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green. I was happy as the grass was green. The night, and you can also check the color symbolism in this poem. The night above the Dingle Valley, starry time, let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes. So time and his eyes, and he's just moving in the eyes of time. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns. He's like the Adam in the Garden of Eden. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns. And once below a time, I lordly had the trees and leaves trailed with daisies and barley down the rivers of the ventful light. So everything is so dreamy in this first picture of the poem. And notice the imagery, how he produces images, and how he tries to interconnect these images together, and how his lines are run on. Now I was young Nazy under the apple boughs about the lilting house. You see, there are no grammatical markers, signs to distinguish this line from the next. I was green and the kind golden. So this run and lines or enjambments show the smooth trail of life when Dylan was a little boy. And we can see another painting here. We have the image of time. We have the image of the boy himself, the river. We have it, the fox we have, and the owl, the sun, and the apple trees. So he's just, swaying from the apple tree. So the experience is a unique one. And as I was green, and you see, he starts the next stanza with "and," so they will see that interconnection. And as I was green and carefree, and time was green, and now he's green. He's as green as the grass. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard and singing as the farm was home. So we see that there is no distinction again between what is external and internal. Home and farmer are the same. So that life has a unity of its own. It's like a unified picture with no divisions in it, with no borders. In the sun, that is young once only. Time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. In green and golden, I was huntsman and herdsman. Huntsman and herdsman shows his relationship with nature. He's both related to wilderness or wild part of the nature and also to the domestic aspect of the nature. The calves sang to my horn. The foxes on the hill barked clear and cold. So we have now, in correspondence with huntsman and herdsman, we have respectively foxes and calves. And the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. It means that I saw holiness or a sacred element in nature. So I didn't need to go to church to see what is holy. I see God in nature. And this is a pantheistic view. He resembles or he's similar to William Wordsworth's pantheistic views in this part of the poem. And again, we see the apple trees here, and the house, the fox, the pheasants will appear later in the poem, and the horses as well. Uh, Everything seems to represent that happy and golden representation in the poem and this picture. All the song long. Oh, look at the expression. I bet you cannot find it in any other places in English. All the song long. It was running. It was lovely. The hayfields high as the house. The tunes from the chimneys. It was air and playing. The tunes. It's not just smoke. It's tuning. It's everything has a harmony. The tunes from the chimneys. It was air and playing, lovely and watery, soft and fire. Even fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls be bearing the farm away. And this is marvelous. This is wonderful. He doesn't say that it was night. He says that the farm, and so that I couldn't see the night because of the darkness. No, the owls take the farm away and then they bring it back in the morning. All the moonlight I heard blessed amongst tables, the nightjars, kind of owl, flying with the wrecks and the horses flashing into the dark. So even in the dark, nature is alive. The owls are in there. Nature has a life of its own, though the human beings may be asleep or unawake. And you can see the horses, the night here, and the smoke out of the chimney. And then to evoke in the farm like a wanderer white, and he changes the images. Now the farm like a wanderer white with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder. It is like a wanderer with a kind of light jacket on him. They're wearing light jacket, and also the cock. That by saying Cuckoo this morning, it was all shining. It was Adam and Maiden, Adam and Maiden. So in the morning it is Adam and Maiden. We are in the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Maiden as a reference can be a reference to the virginity. Every morning it was just virgin. It was everything new. The sky gathered again. Sky gathered again, as if the sky was torn apart, and now it is gathering again. We have that integrity, the unity come back, and this is also a romantic kind of aspect of the poem. And the sun grew round the very day. So it was as if God was creating. So God said, let there be light, and there was light, and the sun grew round that very day. So we are back to the story of creation. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light. And you see that the biblical allusion here. In the first spinning place, the spellbound horses woken warm out of the winning green stable on the fields of praise. So you see, he's using expressions unfamiliar to our ears in English. And you can see another painting here. Everything is green and golden, and everything is hazy in this painting to show the dream-like kind of vision in the poem. And uttered among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new made clouds unhappy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heatless ways. And you see the regret, the nostalgia here. Now we're listening to that grown-up person. Now we know that it was he just narrated was passed away. Heatless ways. My wishes raced through the house high. Hey, when I was a child, my wishes were small. It was like high as the hay. And nothing occurred at my sky blue trays. My sky blue trays, like a child that he owns the world. He's the one at one with the world, my sky blue trace, that time allows in all his tuneful turning so few in such morning songs, before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. We see now the manipulative aspect of the chime as well. And I know that this picture doesn't have a good quality, but it's based in this poem again, and we see the movement of the child to adulthood here. The changes of adulthood are here, and the waves and the beautiful, let's say, flowers of childhood are also here. And we see a small boy just trailing a fern with himself, and then the leaf of fern with himself here. Nothing occurred in the lamb white days. Lamb white days can be a reference to the innocence, it can be also a biblical allusion, or let's say, like William Blake's The Lamb, it can be a reference and allusion to that poem. The time would take me up to the swallow thronged loft by the shadow of my hand. You see the word shadow here, and that the golden and the green turns into shadow. In the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep, I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wait till the farm forever fled from the childless land. Time is not the wanderer coming back, he is fled now. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying. He's no more green and golden. Now in the conclusion of the poem, he's green and dying. Though I sang in my chains, like the sea, I'm still part of the nature, but I'm enchained like the sea. I'm controlled. I'm repeating the same thing. The routine is repeating itself like the waves of the sea. So I'm as if I'm in a prison, and therefore we move from that colorful rainbow life of the childhood into the reality, dark reality or shadowy reality of the adulthood. In this poem, Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. And this was my explanation. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for listening.